Jesus Christ, how do I keep stumbling into these random ass places? Hey folks, it's Indieguy. And you know what? I love Berserk. The 1997 anime is one of my favorites, and Berserk manga is my favorite manga series. But for such a successful and critically acclaimed IP, it never really got a ton of games. There's sort of the Berserk that I guess is alright. And you have that Dynasty Warriors clone that came out in 2017 that is still 60 fucking bucks! Still, people overlook one game, however, and in all honesty, it's not even their fault, cause that game only came out in Japan for the PS2. So say hello to Berserk Millennium Empire Arc, Chapter of the Holy Demon War. Jesus, what a mouthful. And before you start panic, yes, this game has an English patch, otherwise I wouldn't even be making this video.
And if you weren't such a weeb, your dad wouldn't have left you.
Uncalled for? I mean, it's true, but ouch.
Don't care, why aren't you reviewing Cowwoman? Last video got 40 likes.
Listen here, bub. I already wrote this goddamn script. I'm not gonna write a new one now. Do you still want a video this year?
What's the story of the game? Well, it follows the first half of the Millennium Empire Arc pretty well, adding some stuff along the way, for both gameplay and story padding purposes. But we'll get there. Needless to say, you'll be a bit lost if you haven't read the manga, and there are some mild spoilers ahead, but I don't think adding a timestamp is really that necessary. Mostly because it would ruin my retention ratio. Please, for the love of God, I need watch time, please. But the gist is that Guts, also known as the Black Swordsman, and his party comprised by Casca, the Elf Puck, and later on Farnessus, Serpico, and Isidoro, are in search for Helfheim, Puck's homeland, to try and find a cure for Casca's mental regression that she suffered during the eclipse. While doing this, they encounter various dangers, and they stumble upon the apprentice witch Shirke, that helps out the party by giving everyone a magical item or weapon, and later on joining the party herself permanently. This is my favorite arc in the manga, though I do prefer a lot more of the stuff the Kushan towards the end of the arc, which unfortunately isn't shown here, but that's understandable. The story of the manga is presented fairly well in the game, being conveyed through either these CGI cutscenes that somehow look better than the 2016 anime, and these text screens that the timing though, it can be weird at times. Like you might be just cutting down some enemies and then boom, cutscene. It's just weird. But to pad out the running time, they introduce a new antagonist, the Apostle Charles, that haunts Guts with apparitions of his fallen comrades. I really like the idea of Guts quite literally fighting his past, his inner demons if you will. Though I think that the Apostle himself is kind of boring. I prefer a lot more Rosine from the Lost Children arc, or even the Slug Baron, even though they're all pretty comparable. But something that I really enjoy about him is that he is an ever-present threat that lurks in the shadows. The other apostles that Guts faced weren't quite like this. The gameplay is where I think the game shines the brightest. Yeah, the story might be well replicated, but this is the core of the game, and what is there is surprisingly good. This doesn't feel like a cobbled together mess, it feels like care was put into it. This is basically a hack and slash game where you get to kill several hundreds of monsters with a giant sword. It's everything you could wish from a Berserk game. A badass power fantasy with challenging enemies and a weirdly flashed out combat system. Believe it or not, there is a whole plethora of different moves you can make. You have two basic attacks, normal one which you'll be spamming, and a heavy attack that deals a lot of damage but takes a while to wind up. There's also a block which, if you time it right, will either let you reverse or counter an attack. The best part though is that you'll get different types of normal attacks if you move the left stick in different directions, and you can make even more of them if you hold down R1 and do the same thing. Doing it with R1 though comes with a drawback. You'll only be able to more or less attack in a straight line, but the reward might outweigh the risk. The game is even more spiced up with the addition of the rest of Guts' arsenal. You'll have throwing knives which can stun enemies that, in all honesty though, are kind of ass. Then there's a crossbow that again isn't too good, serving more or less the same purpose as the knives. And then there's the bombs and Guts' prosthetic cannon arm. The bombs serve more or less the same purpose as a cannon, but the cannon is Holy shit, now that is a boomstick. These additions are really nice, though most of the times you'll only be using the bombs and cannons since they're the ones that deal the most damage. Besides that, you'll get two more things. One of them is a finisher move that can insta-kill any enemy and deals extra damage to a boss. Now, this is great, not only because you can kill the harder enemies in one hit, but also because depending on the animation, you can kill or injure any enemy that might be close by. The only problem with this attack is that it is really easy to miss, but at least this isn't a single use thing. You can make this attack until the mark that tells you that you have to move disappears. The other ability is Berserker mode, where, well, you go berserk. I like that one time that Griffith said it's Birkin time and then he burked all over Casca. Fucking classic. But with this, you deal a lot more damage and are a lot quicker. These are great additions to the gameplay that feel great. It makes you feel like you are in control of the battlefield and not the other way around. But what about healing? How do you do that? Well, that's simple. You just use Puck's character ability. Yes, there are character abilities and they all vary in terms of usefulness. Puck's ability is the one that you'll use the most since it's the only way to heal yourself other than finding a special springen, which are these hideous little shits that are hidden through the levels. But besides that, you'll have Isidoru's fire attack that deals area effect damage, which is pretty cool. Then you have Shurika's armor, which will give you extra durability. That is alright. And then finally you'll have probably the worst ability, which is Serpico's, where he stops time for a little bit. Now the thing about this is that as soon as you hit an enemy, they'll stop being frozen, which can be an issue with the spongier enemies. But still, it can be used to buy you some time, and in all honesty, it's not that bad. I just didn't think it was as useful as the other ones. But I really like these abilities. They spice up the combat a tad bit more, and in some cases, they give you a fighting chance. It's also a great implementation of the rest of the characters in the combat without having to either babysit them or bear with potentially bad AI. Yet I have to say that sometimes they just take too long to cast. Each time you use the abilities, you have to watch the same goddamn animation, unless you level them up. In that case, they just change. But yeah, this game has RPG mechanics. Each time you kill an enemy, you get a bit of XP, and the more the combo goes up, the more XP you'll gain. With these experience points, you'll be able to level up not just the rest of the party, but also Guts and his stuff, which is pretty cool. The presses are pretty well spaced up, so you won't be too powerful by the end. This game is actually pretty well balanced in that regard, but the game, although I love it to bits, has one of the best examples of awful level design. Oh boy, the levels at times seem like they were designed by sadists. The more you progress in the game, the more likely you are to come across a segment where you have to do the same thing multiple times to the point that it just gets boring. I get it, the nature of a game like this is to be repetitive. Down to its core, it's just killing monsters, which is totally fine and pretty cool. You'll be in your own power fantasy and it will be nice. But when you have to do the same combat encounters over and over and over and over again, it gets dull, no matter how good and refined the gameplay might be. For you to have just a little sniff of it, there's a point where you have to talk to the same group of children 4 fucking times, traversing the entire fucking map before being able to move on. All this while being attacked by infinitely spawning enemies. And don't even fucking get me started on Clithoff. There's a point where you have to find the right path, but if you fuck up once, you get sent back to the start of this hellish maze. And guess what, buckos? All this while being attacked by more infinitely spawning enemies. My favorite. There's more examples of this, and I just fucking hate it. But believe it or not, this inflated the run of the game for me like hell. I finished the game in my first go in a bit less than 13 hours, but if you're not stupid like me, you can probably do it in anywhere between 10 to 12 hours, which is a pretty good run time. But after a certain point, I wasn't getting as much enjoyment out of the game as I was in the beginning, even though the gameplay was getting better and better. This is certainly the game's biggest flaw. It has a sluggish pace that might ruin the enjoyment for someone one, and if it happens to you, I certainly don't blame you. And it's not like there isn't enemy variety to combat this repetitiveness. There's frost golems, rock golems, zombies, trolls, the things from Cliff-Off, among other creatures and their variations. They all have their own attack patterns and can be annoying in their own way, like the fucking crossbowmen. The game would probably be 100 times better if they weren't around. So why are they here? Fuck you, that's why. Oh man, I haven't even touched the other modes yet. There's 100 animal murder and boss battle. Now the latter mode is fine, but as the name suggests, it's just replaying the boss fights while being raided at the end. Which can be cool, but gets boring quick. Boss fights themselves are pretty good, but I don't like how they recycle the same boss fight with the Bend of the Hawk 4 fucking times. It just feels lazy and fights aren't even that challenging. But anyways, now the other mode is where the game's best parts shine. 100 Animal Murder is a basic slaughter mode where you have to fulfill a certain challenge within a limited time, like not having the help of Buck or the rest of the party while beating the shit out of monsters with wooden stuff. Yeah, I don't think it's supposed to say stuff. These challenges are really cool and they help you hone your skills by having you do what you already did, which was beating the shit out of monsters, but doing it better. What is best is that if you beat a challenge, you'll earn a new sword, which you'll be able to use in New Game Plus. Sadly though, these don't change the gameplay too much, and some of them look pretty silly, especially the ones that are shorter than the Dragon Slayer. But the size of the swords is the only thing that influences the gameplay, and only marginally. It's not a whole different game or anything. They're just kind of useless. Unless you're a super fan of Berserk or just want to look goofy as fuck with the stuff. In the end of the day, this is a damn fine Berserk game. One that shows they can focus on telling the story of the original property while having a great combat system. The gameplay is seriously really good, exactly what you'd expect from a good Berserk game. A power fantasy where you slaughter tons of monsters. It does what it came to do and somehow excels at it. It is, however, bogged down by its one major flaw, the level design. Being forced to do the same thing over and over again while being peppered by an endless stream of enemies is nothing less of annoying. This is further aggravated by some annoying as hell enemy types. So for this, I can't give this game a higher score than a 7 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, this is still a great score, and this is a game that I highly recommend, but might not be great for people that are not interested in Berserk in general. And if you are a fan of Berserk, you might not like the repetitive nature of some of these levels, but the gameplay has you covered, my dude. But yeah, that's it. See ya.
Can you please just play Cowwoman now?
Sure. We did manage to hit the target, so I guess it's just fair.
Oh, for the sake of... Wait, did you just agree with me? That's new. What do we do now?
I promise you I'll always be right here. I'm right next to you.